doing? I love your shirt.
Yeah, the Munsters pinball. Ugh.
How you doing?
Right. Hello, hello, hello.
Hi, welcome to Richmond.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this nightmare weekend. Excellent.
So obviously, you have now become a staple at all of these conventions, and you've gotten to travel all around. I want to know, what is your favorite thing about doing these Comic-Cons?
You know, it's really interesting. The Munsters being 60 years old this year, about 3 weeks ago. It's amazing. What I enjoy the most, honestly, is meeting the fans, of course, but the young kids that are into it. It never ceases to amaze me, the production value and the quality of it that could entertain multi-generational people all at the same time, especially young kids today that are so immersed in computer graphics and over-the-top sensory overload. They still enjoy a classic old show that was very simply done with, dinosaur-like special effects, but they still enjoy it.
Of course. And if I remember correctly, I feel like I've seen you at a couple conventions where you've had your cars as well.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I loved the cars were my favorite thing on the show. Whenever we were going to use the Munster coach, number one, I got to ride around in the coolest car in Hollywood, but number two, it meant we would be outside the soundstage because the soundstage was extremely dark and dingy, and so that was a nice break. And as an adult, I wound up buying a couple of the cars, not George Barris cars, but a gentleman who had made his own. But now I got rid of those, and I have actual George Barris accurate cars. I have a Dragula. I have my Eddie Chopper, my motorcycle, which obviously wasn't in the show. But my Munster coach is almost done. So hopefully, maybe next year you'll be able to see if I can work it with GalaxyCon. Maybe we can bring a few of the cars along.
That would be so cool. I love it. Yeah. So I kind of wanted to know, what were you like as a kid growing up? Was this always the dream? Did you always want to pursue acting?
I was just a regular kid, never aspiring to be an actor. I stumbled into it accidentally. My sister was actually the target of the photographer's camera, and when he was done taking some photos of her for print modeling, he asked if he may take a picture, asked my mom, can I take a picture of your son, which she agreed to, and he took that picture and he put it in the window of his studio on Hollywood Boulevard. Lo and behold, I didn't know Amos Carr was the go-to photographer, in Hollywood for kid actors. And about a month later, a producer and a director just happened to be walking down, and they were still in the process of casting the youngest son of Eddie Albert and Jane Wyatt and the little brother of Brenda Lee in this little B movie called The Two Little Bears. So they saw my picture, they thought I had the look they were looking for, and they tracked me down through the photographer. And at that point in time, I had never worked in my life, and Mary Grady was a new child-only agent, the first one in Hollywood, and her son was her only client, who was Robbie in My Three Sons, a gentleman named Don Grady. And he was a Mouseketeer, and he was a great guy. So I kind of stumbled into it, and the long-winded answer to your question, I was just a regular kid that wasn't intimidated by the business, that could memorize lines and take direction, which is kind of what they look for. But the neat part was I looked younger than I was, and I acted older than I was. So they had, a 7-year-old that looked 5, but could, memorize and act like he was 13 or 14.
Right, but it's so serendipitous that you were so ideal for this role, and being able to balance, horror and comedy. What was that like for you, or was it just acting?
It was just, I was very, very lucky that I read the script and I interpreted it, and I was lucky enough to just be myself. And 90% of the time that worked. The trick to acting is if it's not what they want, then you have to take direction. And taking direction means to alter your normal stuff and be able to give the director what he's looking for, which I was able to do. But for me, luckily, just being myself, and I happened to just be in a ton of makeup, worked. And the Munsters itself, which came accidentally to me as well. I mean, I stumbled into the business, and then the Munsters was actually offered to Bill Mumy, who turned it down. And then Happy Durman did the pilot, and then the network saw the pilot, and they said, we're going to move forward, but we want to change out Joan Marshall, who was then playing a character named Phoebe, for Yvonne DiCarlo, and they flew me in from Illinois. I was living in a small town with my grandmother, and they screen tested me directly from the airport to the studio, and me and Yvonne DiCarlo tested together, and they said make arrangements to report to work. Don't go back, don't go back to Illinois. So that was sort of a stumbled into situation, and I was lucky enough to be myself.
And what was it like balancing being a kid with school and everything, and also making this iconic show?
Well, the one thing in Hollywood, it's the same for everybody. Every kid in Hollywood, 3 hours a day school. You have to be in school at least 20 minutes for it to count, because a lot of times they'll throw you in for 10 minutes and pull you out, and they figured you can't really comprehend and maintain any kind of education that way. So 20 minutes minimum. What they would try to do is get your 3 hours in as quickly as possible. But during the summer, when other kids are on summer vacation, you get to go on summer vacation as well. So the shows where you really see a lot of Eddie, you can almost bet your money that was done in the summer, because that 3 hours of school, they could transfer into 3 hours of being on the set, which gave them a much broader window. Because if you think about it, with an hour of makeup and an hour for lunch and an hour for recreation and 3 hours of school, that only really gives them about 2 hours to put you in front of the camera. So if you have a script loaded up with Eddie stuff, that was done when they had that extra 3 hour window.
And being so young, were you familiar with like the ideology of the characters like the Wolfman and Frankenstein's monster?
Yeah, as a kid, I was a regular kid. Slot cars, building models, the Aurora models, if you're a monster fan. And the interesting thing about the Munsters in general, back in the day, each studio was kind of known for a certain genre. 20th Century Fox did disaster movies, 4-Star did westerns, MGM did musicals, but Universal was the monster movie studio in the 30s and 40s. And they brought in the 31 Frankenstein, and then Dracula, then the Mummy, then the Wolfman, and the Creature, and the Invisible Man, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Phantom of the Opera. I mean, every good monster movie was done at Universal. So in 1964, when Leave It to Beaver went off the air and they were looking for a new show to do, they took the Universal monsters and mushed them into a Leave It to Beaver type scenario with friendly next door monsters living a normal life as a normal family. It looked crazy on paper, but because of the fact that the look was really, really cool like the old movies, and the fact that they had Car 54 stars, Fred Gwynn and Al Lewis, Yvonne DiCarlo, a movie star, and Leave It to Beaver type humor, it worked.
I mean, talking about like how it all looked and came together, what was the set like? Was it a set, or was it in an actual?
Yeah, the set was it was very dark, very dirty, very set up. Cobwebs were shot before every shot. Smoke machines would fill it up. Grandpa's laboratory was actually many of the props were from the 1931 Frankenstein movie. So it had the look, and what I enjoyed about it, and like as a kid, I enjoyed watching old black and white, like the Twilight Zones and this and that. It had a look. The lighting, the shadowing, it looked like a movie, even though it was a sitcom. It was shot on film, so I think that transferred well to the whole overall spooky eeriness of the Munster Mansion, which to this day people still say, "Oh man, that was the coolest house. I would have loved to have lived in that house." And then you add in some humor, but it was visually very, very impressive.
Obviously, being a kid, did you feel any like parallels with Eddie? Was there anything that you're like, that's just me?
I'm sorry?
Were there any parallels between you and your character?
Oh, it was funny. No, I was lucky enough to play myself, which I guess that is a parallel. I was being me, and it worked. But a good friend of mine one time said to me, he was a filmmaker himself, he goes, Butch, you did such a good job on that show that literally Eddie could have really come off as a sissy, because they had you dressed in these little shorts and they had you carrying a doll. But he goes, you pulled it off to where you acted like a typical regular little boy. You didn't come off as a mommy's boy or anything. You just you were good enough to do it. And I think a lot of that had to do with Al Lewis and Fred Gwynn being with me in a lot of scenes and allowing me to be myself. And we were the guys. It was like a guy thing. Whenever we were in the dungeon getting into mischief, it worked out really well. And they sort of separated Lily and Marilyn to do their thing, and they let Herman, Eddie, and Grandpa do their thing. So I guess there was a few similarities, but thank goodness I didn't come off as a sissy.
So when you were walking out, I was mentioning your shirt, which you said was based on a pinball machine, yes? What's been like your favorite piece of merchandise or anything that's come from the show?
Wow, that's a good question. The pinball machine came out a few years ago, and I was touring with the Stearns Company with my Munster coach and my Dragula, going around the country. So the pinball machine's pretty cool, but about 30 years ago, they actually tested TV shows in Vegas, the International Gaming Technologies, IGT, which is the biggest in the world for doing slot machines, they tried out a television show concept to see if TV shows would draw people to the slots, and they used the Munsters as the test show. And I think that was one of the coolest things ever because they're really hard to find, but they're still around. But for about 10 years, they were the most successful slot machine ever, and which led to now you see Wheel of Fortune, you see I Dream of Jeannie, you see Beverly Hills. Any TV show related slot machine, you can thank the Munsters because it was such a huge success that they decided they could do it with other ones.
That's so cool. I had no idea. And do you still have a Wolfie doll?
I do. The Woof Woof doll, people ask that. That's the number one asked question. Where's Woof Woof? And what happened was I gave him back at the end of the show, but about 9 years later, I was out at Universal. And the funny thing was, our prop master, Eddie Keys, he was pretty old when I left the Munsters. So when I saw him working at 92 years old, he came up to me and I was, first of all, obviously, oh my God, Eddie, you're alive, great. But number two, he goes, hey, don't go away, I got something for you. And he came back with a Woof Woof doll, and he goes, put this in the trunk of your car and don't tell anybody where you got it. So I acquired him when I was like 19. So I do have several of them now. I have variations have been given to me over the years, but I got 4 Woof Woofs at home.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. All right, so we're going to take some questions from y'all. Again, we do have a microphone. Whatever questions you might have, I urge you to ask now. Any willing victims? Anybody?
Yeah, and
we
it
can
may
keep
have.
Chatting.
My hearing aids are back in my hotel room, so I'll do my best to hear what you're saying, but hopefully just shout it out.
Anybody? Yay!
Oh, you got a microphone. Even better.
Yeah. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Marie, and can you hear me?
A little closer to the mic.
Okay.
You can tip it. There you go.
Here we go. Okay, so my question is I also saw you in a couple episodes of One Adam 12, because that was a TV show I loved watching growing up besides the Munsters. What was the difference between like filming in One Adam 12 versus the Munsters?
Well, okay. Basically, the Adam 12 was done a little bit later. That was when I was 15 and 16. I did the first one was the one where I was the kid with the knife. I did that at 15, and then the next one I did at 17. I mean, I would come back from Brazil. So yeah, 15 and 17. Pretty much the Jack Webb shows, which, Adam 12 was done by Jack Webb, and he did Dragnet and stuff. He had sort of a style, very simplistic style. It wasn't really an overproduced, more of a very basic police on the beat situation. So it was done with a lot. It was done faster. We filmed a lot more because there wasn't all of the makeup and special effects and things that you had to take into position with the Munsters. But it was a great show, and most of them were done outdoors, which I liked. It was outside, and that was the biggest thing for me. And I became good friends with Marty and Kent, and still am friends with Kent. But I liked that episode because it was fun for me to play like a bad kid. Like, oh, you going to arrest me because you think I had a knife? I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you. That's really cool to hear that. Thank you.
Okay.
Great question too. Did you have a question back there?
Yes. Did you hang with any of the other kids from that era when you were on set and stuff?
Did you hang with any of the other kids from that era?
No, basically the other kids. I lived about 30 miles away from Hollywood, so I really kept not purposely. I just happened to grow up a long way away from Hollywood, but I always enjoyed when I had guest stars. Bill Mooney came on the show. Come Back Little Googie. We're still friends today. Peter Robbins, who I was very excited when he came on the show because he was the voice of Charlie Brown. So for me, that was like, I loved Charlie Brown, and when I had Peter Robbins as my guest star and also in the schoolroom with me for a week, that was wonderful. So that was kind of how that worked out. And sometimes I would work movies with other kids, but not too often. But you'd see each other. Occasionally you would have a Christmas parade or something's function was going on for charity, and you'd all be in the same place briefly. But I was pretty much just a regular kid that happened to land in Hollywood once in a while.
Who's next? You can raise your hand and project as well if you guys have any questions, or you can come to the mic. Hey. What's your name?
That's Lauren?
Yes, I'm Lauren. Thank you for remembering. I'd love to hear more about the Phantom Tollbooth. Any favorite memories from the filming of it?
I'd be happy to. Lauren came to the table. I've been lucky enough to do, even though the Munsters and Lidsville are the two main series in My Three Sons, I did a couple of things. The Monkeys Christmas episode comes to mind, but I did a film called The Phantom Tollbooth that she makes reference to. And the neat thing about it is it was Chuck Jones's only feature film. And Chuck Jones, the Roadrunner, the Warner Brothers, the Merry Melodies, I mean, he was like one of the best animators of all time, and he called in all his favors and friends to participate and to work on this movie called The Phantom Tollbooth, which I play the lead character called Milo. It's live action in the beginning, it's live action at the end, but in the middle there's about an hour of all animation. The book was mandatory reading in most schools in the 5th grade level. Digitopolis, Dictionopolis, the numbers and letters and words fighting against each other. It's very, very cool. Unfortunately, the movie was done by MGM, and right when they finished the movie, usually a studio will support the movie's release with a bunch of marketing and a bunch of money being spent to let it come out. Chuck's original plan was to have it play annually like The Wizard of Oz. That's what he was hoping for. But the MGM got out of the movie business right when the movie was released, and they built the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas, so the movie got no support. But it's still considered to be a family treasure, well done, a lot of fun. For me, I really fought very hard to get that part, and luckily I beat out another kind of a acting kid friend named Sheldon Collins, who I'd worked with in the past. And what happened was, during the filming, I became pretty good friends with Chuck Jones, and then I would go in every 3 or 4 months. I'd have to go in and do more voices as they were animating the movie. It was like done in segments. So for 2 years, about every 3 or 4 months, I'd go out to MGM and do some more voices. But that's where the real fun had, because here I am in a booth with Mel Blanc, June Foray, Hans Conried, Dawes Butler, all of the A-lister voiceover people who were in my cartoons that I enjoyed. I'm now seeing the real physical body and their mouths move with these voices coming out. It's like, oh my God. So it was like very magical for me. And the fact that if you see the movie, I don't know if you know this or not, Lauren, but in the opening, when I jump on the cable car, Chuck Jones is sitting next to me. He does like a Hitchcock. So when I jump on the cable car, the guy sitting next to me is Chuck Jones making a brief cameo. So I had a wonderful time, and I'm glad you enjoyed the movie.
And so going from doing the live action, then also the animation part, was there like a difference that you had to do like voice-wise, or was it essentially the same thing throughout?
What happened was you didn't have any reference points, so you would have to just listen to what they wanted you to do. If you had to stand up, you stood up. You spin around, you spin around. It was kind of like when I did the Simpsons voices. They don't have anything up there on the screen for you, so you're really just flying by the seat of your pants, literally. And it's funny, when I went in, I'm expecting to meet a whole bunch of Simpsons voiceovers or people, actors. Nobody's there, so you're just by yourself in a half circle of 17 microphones with a director off stage. Okay, now you're swinging from a chandelier. It's like, what? You go, whoa. Okay, now you're on Homer's shoulders. What? So it's very important for you to just get a little creative and think outside the box, because you have no reference points. And the Phantom Tollbooth was similar to that when you were doing the live stuff. Now the actual scripting and the voices, that was pretty easy to do, because you're back and forth with another actor.
Did someone have a hand up back there? We're just stretching. You also mentioned Lidsville, so can you tell us a little bit about working with Marty and Tim Croft?
Well, I was 18 years. I did Lidsville The Summer. I turned 18 years old, and I had been in Brazil the year before doing a movie that was supposed to elevate me out of the television ranks into the status symbol of movie stars, and you're nominated for a supporting actor award and billboards on Sunset Boulevard, and all that was going on. But when the show was released, and it won a couple of grand prizes at film festivals, the producer and his wife got into a horrible Hollywood divorce, and her name was Rhonda Fleming, and his name was Hall Bartlett. So what happened was, the movie, he hated her so much that he shelved the movie and he never released it. So we went from no movie, no billboards, no Academy Awards, to Saturday morning television in a show called Lidsville. which the reason I'm leading up to it, I was not thinking it was a good idea at the time, and in hindsight, I was very wrong, and it was a great idea to do it, but I was really kind of despondent about, oh man, I'm doing Saturday morning television. But Lidsville, in a joking way, is the kookiest and the kickiest, and it's the living inn. And if you ever go there, you'll be glad you did, because everybody that goes to Lidsville really flips their lid. So I did this. They did Puffin Stuff. They did the Bugaloos. They did Lidsville, Sigmund and the Sea Monster, Land of the Lost, and then they just continued to do stuff. And I did do it the summer I turned 18 with Charles Nelson Riley, Billy Hayes, all the little people, which was kind of interesting because as a kid actor, they use, back then they would call them midgets or dwarves, but today it's little people. And I knew most of them. So the summer was really kind of cool because I'm working with all these people that I knew from past. And as I grew, obviously, they worked for me when I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. But once I got a little taller, I didn't get to see them as often. So it was fun to catch up with them. But that was a summer at Paramount. The Brady Bunch was just out filming there. Fun to see the Bradys. And I'm glad I did it. And Sid's still alive, and there's the Sid and Marty Krofft channel, and I'm very proud of the work that we did back then, even though it kind of was, at the time, I thought it was a little silly Saturday morning.
They seem to be wildly eccentric humans. Is that?
Well, they did Saturday morning then, but they moved into prime time. They did the DC Follies, which was super cutting edge stuff. They did Donnie and Marie. They did the Brady Bunch, the Variety Hour. They did Middle Age Crazy with Bruce Stern and Ann Margaret. I mean, they did a lot of stuff.
So to pivot ever so slightly, October, all things spooky, Halloween coming up. Do you have any Halloween traditions that you like to practice?
Halloween traditions? Well, it was funny with all the accessibility that I had to like masks and Mike Westmore and all the neat stuff. I never really took advantage of that. What I enjoyed about Halloween would be about 3 in the afternoon of the 31st, I would start rummaging through the garage and figure out some kind of a costume of some sort. And literally, it would be whatever was sort of like topical and prevalent at that time. Saturday Night Live came out once, and I was a cone head, and I whipped that together with a blender on my head, the cone. So, or there would be, the monsters were always a fallback. You could always be the mummy, you could always do this. But one time I went as Gertie Jerry. If you watch Get Smart, he was the agent that was half man, half woman. And I went as far as shaving off half my mustache for this one, So I always was very much, I loved Halloween, and it used to be just one day a year, but luckily for us today, it's morphed into 6 weeks of horror fans having a great time, which then morphed into stuff like this that we're doing today. I know, it's the best. It's the best.
Do you have a favorite Universal monster?
Yes, I was always impressed with the Creature of the Black Lagoon. And the reason being, he seemed believable. I could wrap my mind around the fact that up in the Amazon, you got Bigfoots and you got Yetis in the Himalayas. I could wrap myself around when I was a kid going down to the pollywogs and frogs and salamanders and this and that. There probably could be a guy that adapted into a creature deep in the jungle. So to me, it was believable.
And before we were talking about, things that came from the Munsters, like the Pinball Machine, but is there like a piece of art or something that someone made for you that you received that you consider near and dear?
Oh yeah, I've been very, very blessed with the fans are just phenomenal, and a lot of people. I've been honored to where a lot of people have actually come up and said, because of your show or whatever we did, I actually got into either tattooing or film or directing, or I wanted to be this and that. So the show itself lent itself to a lot of creative people, and because of that, I've received an amazing amount of cool stuff that I have, and it's tucked away nicely. And some of it is it's not all. I mean, I never just take it and trash it. People have went through the trouble to do this. So at home, I got a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, there's been some really cool artwork done that I'm proud to own. People with the Munsters as the look. I got one particularly I like that's got me with and without. It's kind of like a skull, and it's got Eddie on this side, and then it's got a skull on this side. But it's tastefully done and it looks cool.
You mentioned tattooing, and
Yeah.
I know that that's something that happens at these conventions. I think here this
Sure.
weekend. Have you signed your signature and anyone made it?
I have. I've actually had a line of ink. A gentleman named Chris51, a tattoo artist I met years ago. He had a show about 10 years ago called Epic Ink. And me and Elvira were his guests on the show. And she got her first tattoo because she used to draw on that dagger. And her daughter, I guess, got and talked her into doing it. And the funny thing is, they did it on the wrong arm. She'll probably kill me. But but what I did is I have a couple behind on my shoulder blades, so I don't really have very much ink. But they're like, one's my sobriety date, and the other one is like a yellow submarine with Eddie Munster as a Simpson character, because I like the Beatles, I like the Simpsons, and Eddie Munster driving the submarine. But I used to have a line of tattoo ink, and I've done a lot of tattoo conventions, and it's amazing how many people have the Universal monsters and even the Munsters tattooed on them. And to answer your question, I've probably done about 6 or 7 autographs.
I have a yellow submarine tattoo also, but
Yeah.
mine doesn't sound as cool as yours. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
What was it like getting to see yourself on The Simpsons?
The funny part about that was I remember vividly, it was 1990. I was in spring break with Grandpa with Budweiser, and The Simpsons, I think it was in its second or third year. And I told myself, I go, man, I would like to be a guest voice on that, because all the guest voices are like rock stars and really cool people. I go, it'll be a great rap party. So about 7 years later, they reach out to me, and I do season 11, and I do my voice and go out and do this. And they gave me some really cool Letterman jacket, and I'm really proud of it. And so I'm thinking the rap party is going to be very cool. And it's 35 years later, they're still on the air. Most of the people that did voices are dead. So I guess it's just, my mind was all about this short-lived Simpsons thing, and here it turns out to be the longest deal ever. And the interesting part about it is how many shows, I don't know if are there a lot of Simpsons fans? It's like a Nostradamus show. There's been so many things that they've seen the future, that these episodes have come up with stuff that happened and has actually happened 20 years after they depicted it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It's scary.
How do they do it?
I do not know.
Uh-oh. All right. We do have some time for more questions. If anyone else has a question, come to the mic, shout it out. Anything whatsoever?
That's okay. If not, I'll go back to my table.
No, it's cool. We'll chat for a few more. Then we're going to take a big group picture. Then
Oh, yeah.
Then we'll send you back. I want to know, outside of doing these conventions,
Yeah.
what are some of your hobbies that you like to do in your spare time?
Well, I'm a kind of a gearhead, and I enjoy traveling. And one of the things I'm very excited about is that's a really good fit that's come my way is I became a member of the Drive-In Owners Association of America. And although I don't own a drive-in, I joined the association because I'm going to be working with owners to supply them with double features of classic monster movies. And I'm going to educate people. I grew up in the drive-in community. Some of my fondest memories and the rites of passage and everything else came from being a kid in the 60s with a car and a drive-in. So I'm looking forward to working with these drive-in owners next year to show them how to do special marketing promotions, especially midweek when they are normally not even open. So I'm on the ground, I'm driving around with my Munster cars, and I'm going to work with them and car clubs to create some interesting stuff next summer, and I'm very excited about that.
What do you think it is personally that has made the Munsters as beloved as it is and kept this cult following going for, like you said, is it 60 years?
60 years a couple weeks ago, yeah. A couple things come into mind. Number one, it was the decade. The 60s was just an incredible decade. I started working in 1960, I stopped in 1973, so the meat of my existence was in that decade. So you had a show that was well produced. Timing was good. The whole society thing, we were still living in a very, a happier place than we are today. Not to get on that stuff, but it was just a time that people have fond memories of. The original go of it and the success of it had to do with the quality of the show. It was well written. We had great guest stars. We had cool cars. We had great makeup. The best special effects people at the time, and they're just. Back in the day, we did 39 episodes a year, so you didn't have to do 5 years worth of shows to get noticed, and where there was only 3 channels. So people remember it vividly because there was no competition, internet and no cable, and the TV guide was the Bible for information and entertainment during the week. So we were a successful show for 2 years. And then people, it's kind of like the Beatles, you know, they 5 years worth of music, and they're around 60 years later as well. Not that I'm equating the Munsters to the Beatles, but the period and the entertainment industry back in the 60s spawned a lot of great stuff that is still very entertaining today. I mean, I flip through 800 channels and I wind up back with Andy and Mayberry, you know, looking for something to watch, and how this happens, and you wind up back with the Dick Van Dyke Show, or you wind up back with Lucy. It's just a great decade for memories, but it was also quality-driven stuff back then.
Well, thank you so much. And if it's